test data engineer. The next thing I want to show is test data generation, right? This is synthetic data generation. So we've already done some modeling of our environment. We've done some data masking. The next thing I want to show is actually generating data synthetically. So one of the things you want to do is actually register tables that you care about that you want to be able to synthetically generate data into. So in this case, essentially the registration would say, you see register different objects so we can generate data as request response pairs, whistles, JSON files, right? And these are all for like APIs. So if we generate data into an API, in this case we're going to generate data into a table. So I can select the table, and then I can choose a particular connection profile I want to use. So we set up a SAP HANA profile that's connecting to HANA Express in our Google Cloud repository or platform. And here I can select my schema. So in this case, it's the SAP HANA database. And then I can choose which tables out of that schema that I want to actually register. So in this case, I'm going to generate vendor records. So I'd want to register LAF1 and LFA1 and LFB1. Right, so I already have these two registered, but if I was going to register them, I could click this and hit register. You can see here it says no changes found. So if there's schema differences, we will actually detect that there's been schema differences that allows you as a test data engineer to know, okay, if I have assets on using these tables, then I'm going to have to be able to go through, understand what these changes are, which it'll tell you here, and then you can go and modify your assets to accommodate those changes. In this case, we've already registered. So I would come in and actually create a new generator. So here I can hit new generator. I've already created my generator here, so I'll select that instead of creating a new one. And the first thing you're going to do when you create a new generator is select which tables you're going to use in the generation. So since we're creating a record for the vendor master table, and we want the associated records, I'll actually select LFA1 and LFB1 to be able to add to my particular generator. Right, so I've selected one table and now I'm going to select the other. Oops. Now I have the two tables that I'm looking for, LFA1 and LFB1. Now, the interesting thing here is I already have rules created, but essentially you would have, you would create a new row. By clicking on the R, it will generate a row and it will be empty, and then you can generate rules for that particular table that you want to create. So you might generate one or more records depending on what your requirements are. Now, one of the keys to this is you want to generate records across multiple tables, or maybe even across multiple data stores, and you need that data to align. So when you're actually putting rules into this generator on how you want the data to be generated, then you need to be able to reference data across these multiple tables, so IDs line up and things like that, right? Honoring foreign key relationships and those types of things. So here is a situation where I'm actually just using a variable that I created called SAP client. This is because I'm going to allow the user from a self-service perspective to be able to select which client, SAP client, they want to use or assign this vendor record to. Right, so I've just put in a variable there that I'm going to allow users to input information into. Here is for the vendor record, the vendor number. Right, so here I've actually looked at the format and I've said I'm going to put in a random number, and I'm going to choose one of these numbers, right? So these are all just functions. So this is what we call our data painter, and it allows you to choose from over 100 some odd functions, and functions that you can actually aggregate together to be able to create the types of data that you're looking for. So you can actually pick from seed lists, you can manipulate dates and strings, and have case statements for things like control logic to allow you to create very sophisticated rules to be able to generate data in a realistic way. So in this particular rule that I've created allows me to generate a number. So that's a sample number. I can keep hitting it and just kind of get an idea on what the numbers look like. So this is where a test data engineer really needs to understand the format of the data and how it should look, right? And so if I'm happy with that, then I can insert that rule. So other places where I might need to have some referential integrity. So I'm actually generating the vendor number here, but I also need the record in LFB1 to also leverage that same vendor number, because it's using this relationship here to correlate this data across these two tables. So here I'm actually leveraging a reference to the LFA1 table, getting the vendor record vendor number from that particular data generation. That way it'll populate the LFB1 with that particular vendor number. So I'm getting that referential integrity. So I'm not going to go through all the different rules in here. I think the important point is we have a whole library of rules that allows you to specify how you want your data generated across these. The next thing that's important is you can create configurations. So configuration is basically how you want the data to be generated. So I'm creating a configuration for my test environment. I'm saying we're going to generate data into both of these tables, and this is the connection information to the target environment that I want to be able to use. So I can save that configuration and then make it active for allow testers to be able to generate data into that environment. So if I have multiple targets, I can have multiple configurations to allow the tester to be able to choose which environment they want to push this data into. So that's pretty much all there is to actually creating a generator. As a test data engineer, I might want to be able to test this. And you can see I've actually assigned variables to certain areas. So you can see I have defaults for those variables. So as I talked about earlier, choosing which SAP client I want to push the record to, what's the reconciliation account, what's the payment term, what's the company code. These are all variables that I can allow a tester to be able to select as a part of self-service. Now, as a test data engineer, if I'm testing this, I might want to just select, maybe I'm going to put this record that I'm testing into the SAP Client 200. I might choose a particular reconciliation account that's available. Maybe I'm going to choose a particular payment term, for example, and then I can choose which company code that I'm going to put this record under for this vendor, right? So I can select those, and then I can go ahead and select my schema here, and then I can go ahead and publish this. What this is going to do is just run a job, and I can go see this job and see that it's running. I can click on the job, I can see when it was ran, how many records I'm actually going to insert, which in this case is just one. It'll be one record into each of those tables because that's the way the generator is designed. And then it'll show me once it's complete. So at that point I can download, because this is from the job engine, I can select the download and I can actually see the information of what actually took place during that synthetic data generation. So it gives me this log, and it shows me I published one record into LFA1, and the second publish was one record into LFB1, right? So I can actually see that these rows were inserted. And then I should be able to go into the table itself and understand or see the data that I generated.